It looks like the world of game publication and distribution is an ever shrinking entity. And, well, we have another bit of shrinkage here. And I'm telling you, they didn't jump in the pool. I think this is one less producer, one less publisher that'll be out there. Who is it? Well, let's find out on That Game Place. Hi, folks, it's Coach Casino here on That Game Place with my pal Spencer Baculi from Bounding into Comics. How's it going, Spencer?
Hey, Culture, it's going well. I am happy to be here for the Summer of George and to talk about some video game publishing disasters.
Well, yeah, and boy, do we have one. Wait, you know what? Let's not bury the lead. There's a publisher out there that gets a lot of credit for some of the great things they do, and recently some credit for some not so great things, like basically pulling up stakes and calling it quits. It looks like Humble Games devs were told that the company is shutting down, and that's about as precise a way to describe what's going on. But for whatever reason, Humble said, no, we're not really. But they actually are. They actually claim that they are saying they're restructuring, but the affected staff are saying that ain't true. You heard anything about this, Spencer?
Yeah, I've heard the story itself. So for those of you out there who don't know the exact details, there is a company out there that you might know of called the Humble Bundle Company, essentially. It is a charity group that offers a lot. They offer video game bundles where, spend $20 and get these 40 Activision games, get these 50 Dungeons and Dragons things. They also do comic book bundles, manga bundles, learning book bundles and all that fun stuff. So a couple years ago, they decided that, hey, if we're helping, get games into players' hands, why don't we enter the publishing sphere? So they launched the Humble Games publishing imprint, which was, as you sort of noted at the beginning, an imprint for indie specific titles. So they weren't publishing big AAA things. These were very specific indie, PC, Steam specific, maybe the occasional Switch release games. So the interesting thing to note here, Culture, is that in the wake of this entire thing shutting down, this is just the latest in a string of Western studios that are shutting down, both big and little.
Yeah, that actually is something I think most people are starting to pay attention to. And I noticed here we got an update on this story because I've been looking at this story now for 4 or 5 days, maybe longer at this point, probably longer when you guys are actually seeing it out there. But on the 25th, the update says former Humble staff have disputed the company's statement regarding the restructuring, claiming it underplays the impact on the team. Why? Well, anonymous staff member impacted by the layoffs told GamesIndustry.biz, which is where I'm getting this story from, that this is patently incorrect, emphasizing that all Humble Games staff were laid off this week. So they let them all go. Yeah, that's not restructuring. That's see ya. Yeah.
At this point, if that is true, which for all intents and purposes, if all the staff is coming out and saying it's true, it seems like it is. Yeah, this isn't a restructuring. This is essentially we're wearing the brand's corpse now. It's almost like it's an imprint, but it doesn't really exist as its own imprint. Sort of like for our comic book readers out there, a couple years ago, DC tried to revive the Wildstorm imprint, but it wasn't a real imprint. It was like 2 books within the main DC continuity that were still using DC characters and DC writers and sharing the DC offices. So it was really just a sticker they were slapping on some covers to get people who knew the brand to hop on board. And yeah, I think that's what they're doing with this Humble Games brand.
And I think you're correct. In fact, operations are said to be moving to a third-party consultancy, which we were talking about in the background, called the Powell Group, and they're going to handle all the remaining games. So in a transcript of the meeting, Steve Horowitz, who's the president of Ziff Davis Shopping and Technology Division, suggested effective staff may be offered opportunities elsewhere within Ziff Davis or at this other place, this consultancy, the Powell Group. That's pretty wild. I guess Aftermath has received similar reports with former Humble Games employees telling the site that the restructuring claim is to save face, but it's a lie. Now, we're starting to see this happen more and more frequently. As I said, I thought studios would be going out of business like crazy
Oh
this
yeah.
year, and they have been. I
What did you
predicted
bet, Culture? Yeah, there you go. Your prediction.
yeah, my prediction was 9, Spencer. I thought we'd lose 9 studios this year. I didn't
I
realize
think
we were
we're
going to be
at that,
losing.
right?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're losing like all these entities, and we're getting very close. And having Humble shut down, that's not great. Now, while not technically a studio, they're still a distributor, but I mean, everybody that's been tied to, some very poor
Yeah.
decisions is closing up shop. So,
Well, it's interesting that you mention everybody tied to very poor decisions,
yeah.
because you mentioned it briefly, but I think we should really talk about it. The ownership of Humble Games, as you mentioned a second ago, they're owned by Ziff Davis, the
Mhm.
publishing entity, which has a bunch of different imprints, most notably a bunch of video game news imprints. They own IGN, Rock Paper Shotgun, VG 24/7. A lot of these entities, which, as we've been covering here on That Game Place, over on your channel, Culture, over on Bounding into Comics, the video games press is dying in itself. Nobody is trusting them anymore. Everything's dying. So you're sort of seeing a trickle down, or not even a trickle down. It's just sort of a rot coming from the inside out, right? All you had Ziff Davis pushing all of these really bad levels of journalism, which in turn had to fund their independent endeavors. And while some of these games were probably really good, I haven't played, all of them. It just, if you were relying on income from VG 24/7 to fund it, I don't know really what you were expecting to happen.
Yeah, I don't know either, other than they kind of came out with some really high quality initial statements that just didn't seem to survive the float test, and they started to sink like stones. And again, 36 employees were basically laid off with no notice, and just making Ziff Davis look terrible, and making the overall brand
Yeah.
of Humble Bundle kind of look a little stinky. What I also didn't know is that Ziff Davis also owns the publication um, Gamer Network, which also owns GamesIndustry.biz, which is where we're getting the
Ta-da!
story from.
Look at that. It's the octopus, the web. It just goes.
Uh,
Everything is connected.
it's pure insanity. But when I look at these things, and again, this is a conversation that I know you're like right on top of. These industries are collapsing in and on themselves. A lot of it is because they stretch so far based on a revenue scheme that didn't actually bring in any revenue. They were living off of venture capital and other
Yep.
other entities, liberties, and those liberties have dried up. They don't have the ability to support these other operations that really are just a giant money suck. They're not profit centers.
No.
So the industry as a whole, though, I would say, is literally crumbling. Because again, when you were making paper mache, that's great. It's just you're not gonna try to drive a dump truck over it because it's not gonna hold the weight, and
Right.
that's kind of what's been happening for a while. I at one point in time I couldn't believe being interested in game journalism, right? Back when
Right.
there was actually such a thing. I was like, I can't believe you get paid to do this. Well, apparently you were getting paid, but not to do that because there was no money to be made. And again, it makes a lot of sense why a lot of these big things didn't last longer, because they were spending money even faster. And as we
Right.
watch Go Media collapse, I mean, it's just a matter of time before we watch the same thing happen to Kotaku and all the other entities that are attached to them as well. I don't know. Do you think they actually make money at any of these game sites?
At in the game's publication itself, I honestly don't, because we are seeing such a fundamental shift, like you were talking about, in the industry as a whole. And it's sort of twofold. One, in terms of video games themselves, we're in that era where for the last 5 years, the industry has been riding sort of on hopes and dreams. During the pandemic era, they saw everybody, all their profits boomed, hardware and sales and games boomed. And obviously, we all know why, because people were stuck at home. These devs, particularly in the Western sphere, thought, oh, this is going to last forever. Look at all this money. Let's invest in everything. We're going to grow so much. Everybody's going to love this. And then when things inevitably changed, they go, oh, what happened? Oh no, now we have to reap essentially what we sowed. They don't have any foresight past next week. What's the next big tweet going to say? Are we going to look good from that standard? So you have just failing quality and failing development philosophies in the industry, coupled with sites that don't really hold anybody to task anymore, right? Like we only see these, like for example, gamesindustry.biz here is holding Humble to task, but that's because they're essentially friends, as you just detailed, with probably like they're connected to the people who got laid off. So it's sort of like a circling the wagons for their friends type of thing. There's no going, hey, you guys aren't making a good game. Hey, you guys aren't really hitting the mark. Everything is too kitty gloves. Let everybody try. Everything is so great right now. And it's just all of that combined means players don't want to play. Players don't want to listen to people who are lying to them. So the traditional media collapses, and that's where you get the rise of YouTubers. You get us here. You get Stuttering Craig over at Side Scrollers with that crew. All of these independent voices are being listened to because in a day and age where all of these PR fluff statements are what we get every day from every corner, people just want one bit of honesty. And until they get that honesty back in the real media, there's not going to be any money to be made any there. All these sites are going to be consolidated, shut down, like smashed together within 2 years. And I am being just very, very generous. If I were being realistic, I would say within 6 months, but we've seen the fact that real economics don't really apply to modern business nowadays. Really bad ventures can stay afloat for months. Case in point, the MCU, but that's for another channel.
It is, absolutely. But I will say this, that I feel at the end of the day very badly for the 36 people that no longer have their job at
Absolutely.
Humble Games. And I am reminded that there are a lot of these similar entities that are probably in similar precarious shape when it comes to their finances and whether or not they'll even exist, as you suggest, for 6 months or more. But I'm going to leave it to our audience to have the final word here. What do you think? Do you think that we're going to continue to see the collapse of the quote unquote games press, but more importantly, the studios, the publishers, the distributors, all of the people in this chain that allow for the distribution of video games, the creation of video games, and the conversation of video games? Are we just a matter of months away from complete collapse, or are we a year or two away? Your guess is as good as ours. So let us know your thoughts down in the comments section below. And as always, game on!